Snow whispered against the windows like a secret trying to escape, but inside the house, everything was too loud. The fine china clinked on the heavy oak table, and the roast steam curled like a ghost over a candle. It was supposed to be a perfect Christmas dinner, at least, that's how my mother had designed it. Every detail, the matching napkins, the hand-painted place cards, the cranberry sauce from scratch, not a can in sight. Everything looked perfect, but it felt like a stage. I hadn't been home in over a year. Not since the last phone call ended in my mother hanging up on me, because I said I wouldn't change my career, just to make her look better in front of her friends. And yet here I was, back in her house at her table, trying to be civil. I don't even know why I said yes to the invitation. Maybe I still hoped, in some small, pathetic corner of my heart, that things would be different, that she'd see me. Not the version she invented, not the disobedient daughter she always claimed I was, just me, Elena. But that's not how things work in Margaret Sinclair's world. So, Elena, she said, sipping her wine like a queen addressing the court. Still playing artist in the city. Here we go, I'm not playing. I said calmly, I sell my work online, it's going well. She gave a small, disbelieving laugh. Oh, right, Etsy, very prestigious. My cousin Sam tried to change the subject, bless him. Actually, a lot of independent creators are making great livings online now. It's kind of the future. Margaret smiled at him thinly. Of course, Sam, but Alina knows what I mean. She had a full ride to law school and decided to throw it away to glue feathers on notebooks, or whatever it is she does now. It's called mixed media illustration, I said, and I didn't throw anything away. I chose my life. That last line hung in the air like smoke. Across the table, my younger brother looked down at his plate. My father quietly poured himself more wine. No one said anything. Not Soul backed me up. It was always like this. My mother would jab with her passive, aggressive little knives, and the whole family would act like it was normal, because it was normal in this house. Meant don't upset Margaret, don't challenge her, don't make her feel anything less than completely in control. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I set my fork down. You invited me here, Mom. I thought maybe this year we could just be decent to each other. Oh, is that what you thought? She said, voice rising, after you abandoned this family. After you humiliated me by walking out the way you did, just because you didn't want to be told what was best for you. I walked out because I was suffocating, I said louder now, because for 25 years I let you run my life like a campaign you were trying to win. And when I finally chose something for myself, you acted like I betrayed you. I gave you everything, she snapped. I sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay me, with disrespect. No, I said, standing with boundaries. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was seismic, like the ground had shifted beneath all of us. Her face turned red, not with sadness. Fury, the kind of fury that comes from losing control of a carefully curated narrative. You are dead to me, she hissed, each word sharp and precise like a blade. You are dead to me, Alina. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just nodded slowly, and then I picked up my coat from the back of the chair and walked toward the door. No one stopped me, not even my dad, not even my brother. Snow hit harder now, small needles against my cheeks. I walked down the icy steps alone, the laughter and clatter of dishes behind me like echoes of another life. My breath came in clouds, white and full, and for the first time all evening, maybe in years, I felt something real. I was dead to her, but for the first time, I was alive to myself. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel off the interstate, the kind with beige walls and vending machines that only took quarters. My coat was still damp from the snow. My phone had no messages. My bank account had $1,287.42 in it. That was all I had, but I felt weightless, not happy, not yet, but free, and freedom, I was learning, is not always joyful at first. Sometimes it's just quiet, awkward, lonely, but alive. I spent the next week driving with no real plan, just heading south, following the warmth. Every mile I put between myself and my mother's house, I felt a little less like the girl who used to live in her shadow. I played old indie playlists from college, stopped at gas stations for instant coffee, and cried more than I'd admit. I finally landed in a town called Maple Glen, a quiet place nestled between mountains and lakes, the kind of town where strangers wave at you just because it's polite. I rented a tiny upstairs studio above a hardware store. The kitchen barely fit a stove and sink. The shower squeaked, but it was mine. There was no one to criticize my choice of curtains, no passive, aggressive comments about how I let myself go without makeup, no one to scoff at my sketchbook left open on the table, just me and silence. I got a part-time job at a used bookstore cafe. The owner, Linda, was a 50-something woman with silver, streaked curls and an oversized cardigan that smelled like cinnamon. She asked me one question during the interview. Can you make coffee without burning the place down? I said yes. She hired me on the spot. The pay wasn't much, but the bookstore had the softest corners, plush armchairs, old wooden floors, fairy lights around the windows. I stocked shelves, made cappuccinos, and watched the snow fall while strangers read quietly by the fire. It felt like I was healing by osmosis. In the evenings I sketched, I painted. I opened an online shop again, this time with my own name on it, not some fake brand I invented to sound legit. Alina Creates. I sold hand-bound journals, painted bookmarks, and custom watercolor prints with gentle affirmations. It started slow, but something about the work felt right, like I was stitching myself back together one brushstroke at a time. Still, I couldn't shake the voice in my head, my mother's voice, criticizing everything. Who's going to buy that? You think this is art? You're wasting your potential. That voice lived rent-free in my mind, so I did something terrifying. I went to therapy. The town had one therapist, an older woman named Martha, who wore knitted scarves and spoke with a calm, deliberate voice. She didn't ask about my mother at first. Instead, she asked about me, and I realized I didn't know how to talk about myself without talking about her. For years, I had let my identity be shaped in contrast to my mother. Her expectations, her standards, her rules. She liked control, I liked freedom. She wanted me perfect, I wanted to breathe, but in the quiet of this new life, I began to realize I wasn't just someone who left my mother. I was someone who chose herself. One afternoon in session, Martha asked, "When was the last time you did something just for joy?" I froze. Joy. It took me 2 weeks to answer. The memory came in a flash. I was 11, painting flowers on the sidewalk with chalk, barefoot, music blasting from a neighbor's window. My mother had dragged me inside and scrubbed my knees raw for embarrassing the family. I hadn't drawn outside again for over a decade, so I bought a box of chalk and walked to the park. The grass was stiff with frost, but I sat down anyway, jeans against the cold path, and started drawing. Bright flowers, vines, messy suns. A child stopped to watch me. Then her mother smiled and said, "That's beautiful." I didn't say thank you. I just nodded, eyes burning with something between grief and gratitude. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I am allowed to be happy without her permission." Spring came slowly to Maple Glen, with it more light, more orders in my shop, more days where I didn't think of her at all. I made friends, real ones. Linda invited me over for Sunday dinners. I met Ezra, a barista who played piano and made me laugh without needing anything in return. People saw me here, not the problem child, not the disappointment, not the rebel, just Alina. One night, I stood by the lake, watching the sun melt into the water, and realized I hadn't cried in a week, maybe more. That felt like a miracle. I was still broke, still figuring things out, but I was safe, and I was mine. By the time summer arrived in Maple Glen, my hands were always stained with ink, paint, or glue, the beautiful mess of building something with purpose. My online shop, Alina Creates, had grown into more than I dreamed it could. It started with journals and bookmarks, but soon, customers were messaging me for custom pieces, wedding vows hand-lettered, grief journals painted with forget-me-nots, self-love kits wrapped in hand, dyed paper. It wasn't just about making art anymore. It was about helping people feel seen. I didn't advertise. I didn't hustle. I created with honesty. And somehow, the right people found me. Maybe it was the way I wrote my product notes, quiet reminders like "you are not too much," or "you're allowed to start over." Maybe it was because I was healing while I created. People feel that. They feel when something's real. One night, I shipped a package to someone named Priya in Oregon. She wrote back a week later. I cried when I opened this. "I've been trying to leave my mother's house for years." This reminded me that it's possible. I stared at her message for 10 minutes, and then I cried too, because she didn't know it, but we were both doing the same thing, building lives from the ruins of permission we never received. My apartment, small and cluttered, had become my sanctuary. There were art supplies on every surface, plants trailing from the windows, and fairy lights that stayed on year-round. I started waking up excited, not always, but often enough that it felt like progress. And then one morning it happened. My past came knocking. Well, pinging actually. A Facebook message from her, Margaret Sinclair. You've made your point. Now come home. I stared at the screen for a long time. My stomach didn't twist with guilt, just disbelief, that after all this time she still thought this was a phase, a tantrum, like my entire life was just a disobedient foot stomp. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another message came. I saw your little art business online. Congratulations on being artsy. You could have had a real career. I deleted it. A week later. This is ridiculous, Alina. Your father isn't well. He misses you. That one got to me. I called my father directly. He answered after 3 rings, his voice cautious, tired. Hi, Dad. I said. There was silence on the other end. Then he sighed. She doesn't know you called, does she? No, I said. He sounded older, smaller, not just in age, but in presence. Like years under her thumb had worn him into something quieter than he used to be. We talked for 20 minutes, mostly about the weather, the dog, a bit about my shop. He said he was proud of me. He whispered it like it was a confession. I cried after we hung up. I didn't call again. A few months later, an email came from my mother. Subject line, let's talk. Inside, it was short. 1 sentence. I think we both said things we didn't mean. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, half covered in paint. I didn't respond. She tried again through relatives. I got a text from my cousin Rebecca, saying my mother was really trying, and I should be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. The phrase, women are taught from childhood like a hymn. Translation, don't upset people, especially powerful ones, even if they hurt you. I blocked Rebecca, then came the final message, an email on my birthday. No greeting, no warmth. You've embarrassed this family long enough. Grow up. Come home. And just like that, I knew I didn't owe her anything. Not a reply, not a response, not a reason. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote a letter to her, but not for her. I never sent it. I burned it in my fireplace, word by word, like a ritual. But here's what it said. Dear Mother, you always said I was too sensitive. That I overreacted. That I owed you everything. But I see now that what you called sensitivity was just me feeling things you didn't want to acknowledge. That my overreactions were attempts to be heard in a house that only valued silence. And that what I owed you was never gratitude, it was obedience, and I'm done with that. You don't get to rewrite what happened. You don't get to call me back into your control, like it's some sort of favor. I'm not your shadow anymore. I'm not your project. I'm not your daughter, not in the way you define it. You said I was dead to you. Fine, let me be dead to you, because in leaving, I came alive, and I won't apologize for that. Goodbye, Alina. That night, as the last corner of the letter turned to ash, I opened my windows and let the cold autumn air in. The moon was full. The street was quiet, and I felt something click into place. Not revenge, not even victory, just peace. A peace that came from being completely unreachable. She couldn't guilt me. She couldn't change me. She couldn't touch me anymore. And that, I realized, was the sweetest kind of freedom, not loud or dramatic, but firm, calm, steady. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't fighting. I was simply gone from her world and fully present in my own. 2 years passed since the last Christmas dinner, since my mother told me I was dead to her, and I walked away, since I found the courage to truly choose myself, to build a life that was mine and mine alone. I never went back to that house, never responded to her messages. The pain of leaving faded into the quiet, gentle hum of my life in Maple Glen, but still, the holidays brought up memories I wasn't sure I wanted to face again. Christmas had always been her domain, her performance, the dinner, the decorations, the expectations. It had always been her idea of perfection, not mine. But this year, something was different. It was early December when I decided that, this time, I wouldn't let the holiday feel like a ghost chasing me. I wouldn't let her words linger over me anymore. The sting of her rejection was still there, but it wasn't a wound anymore. It had healed into something I could carry, something stronger. I had a family now, one I chose, not one I was born into. Linda, who owned the bookstore cafe, invited me to spend Christmas with her and her partner, Jamie. I hesitated at first. I had never thought about creating new traditions. I had always felt the tug of the past, of the things I'd been taught to expect. But I wasn't going to let my mother's idea of family shape this holiday. So I said yes, and I began preparing. Christmas Eve arrived quiet and bright, with snow falling in soft layers over the streets of Maple Glen. I helped Linda prepare a meal for the next day, roasted vegetables, a turkey stuffed with rosemary and garlic, and cranberry sauce that smelled like it had been picked straight from the earth. When I arrived at Linda's house, the first thing I noticed was the smell of cinnamon and pine. The house was warm, with mismatched chairs around a low wooden table, and soft jazz music playing in the background. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, it was human, it was love. The table was set with care, but there were no place cards, no elaborate arrangements. There was no pretending, just the people who had found their way to each other, and the food they had prepared. With their hands, Linda greeted me with a hug, her arms wrapping me in a comfort I didn't know I'd needed. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice soft but steady. She didn't ask about my mother, she didn't need to. We sat around the table, the five of us, Linda, Jamie, Ezra the barista I'd become friends with, and their daughter, Ruby, who was 6 and had a laugh that filled the room with light. I helped serve the food, my hand steady as I realized this was mine, this moment, this piece. We laughed, we ate. We told stories, some funny, some sweet, and some simply honest. It was the first Christmas in years that felt like it was mine. As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on the years I'd spent chasing her approval, the years I'd spent in the shadow of a family that never saw me. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. I had walked away from a life that was never truly mine, and I had built something better, not out of defiance, but out of love for myself and for the people who had chosen me. I had made peace with what I'd lost. I had created my own family. When dessert was served, and we all dug into a warm apple pie that Linda had made, Ruby suddenly turned to me, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Auntie Alina," she said, her voice sweet and innocent, "are you going to send a letter to your mom?" For a moment the question hung in the air. No one spoke. The silence stretched, but not in the way it had at that Christmas dinner years ago, not in the suffocating, oppressive silence where I felt like I was choking on words. This silence was different. I looked down at my plate. I thought about the last time I had written a letter, the one I'd burned, the words that had been both a goodbye and a declaration of independence. I thought about how I no longer needed her to give me permission to live, how I didn't need to respond to her. I thought about how, in her absence, I had finally found the space to breathe. "No," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not." Ruby smiled, satisfied with my answer, but I felt something shift inside me, something solidifying. It wasn't just a choice, it was a truth. For the first time in my life, I was okay with not being who she wanted me to be. I was finally free of the need to make her proud, to win her love. I looked up from my plate, meeting Linda's eyes across the table. She smiled at me, her expression warm and knowing. "You're home," she said softly, as if she could read the thought in my mind. I nodded, a soft smile curving my lips. I wasn't just here for the evening. I wasn't just visiting. I was home. The night stretched into the early hours of Christmas morning, and we all gathered on the couch with mugs of tea, warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth. Ruby curled up in her parents' laps, her small hands clutching her stuffed bunny, her face peaceful in the way only children can be when they feel truly safe. As I looked around the room, I realized that my life had filled itself with people who chose me, people who saw me for who I was, not who I could become for them, and it was more than enough. It was everything. I didn't need my mother's approval. I didn't need her to see me. I had built a life I could stand in, one that didn't require her permission or validation. When I went to bed that night, I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel empty. I felt full of love, full of peace, and full of a freedom I had fought for, even when it felt like I was walking away from everything. I was no longer her daughter, but I was finally alive.